Hearthstone's next expansion, Madness at the Darkmoon Faire, was just announced, and we'll be getting not 1, not 2, but 4 new Old God cards. And these cards have some pretty insane effects, so I'm going to show you how you can use them in your decks. So first up for the new Old God cards is going to be Yoggsaron, the Defiler. Now, obviously, we have a lot more corrupted cards left to be revealed, but he has an insane effect, and I'm excited about it already. But just looking at this card and its effect, I think it naturally fits into kind of slower mid-range decks and a control deck for like that late game bomb. It is a 10 mana, 10/10, great stats, but it doesn't have any rush or taunt. So you do need to generate some kind of taunts, rush, or healing to go alongside it to make it worthwhile. Otherwise, your opponent can just rush you down over the next turn. I like to kind of compare this card to like a King Feoris. They're both kind of late game bombs, but the reason why King Feoris doesn't see a whole lot of play is because it's very risky. If you don't happen to get a taunt or a rush from King Feoris, then your opponent will just run you over on the next turn and you're just dead. But this, however, is a little bit more of a controlled one of them. If you have some removal or some rush minions that are corrupted, then you can go ahead and play them in that same turn for 0 mana and completely negate the drawback of this card not having taunt or rush. We've already seen a couple examples of these corrupted cards revealed. So we have the new Dunk Tank card, which is a removal spell you can play in the same turn. And we also have the new Fleethoof Pearl Tusk, which is a rush corrupted minion that you can play in the same turn to regain some of that tempo. Now, you may or may not want to use these cards. I don't know about the Fleethoof Pearl Tusk. It's pretty slow tempo of a card in a control deck, but this is just an example of something that you could use. An example of a good control deck that could use this card would be like a control Shaman, because Shaman has a hard time at drawing cards. They like to usually generate the resources. So as their hand gets emptier, they just slam down this Yoggsaron and then completely fill up their hand with removal or minions, so that way they're set for the rest of the game. It also gives Shaman that much needed late game bomb or that win condition that they so desperately need. An example of like a slower mid-range deck that could use this card would be like a Quest Warlock. Because this guy is so expensive, being able to discount him down to 0 with the Quest hero power can provide some huge swing turns. You discount this guy down to 0, play him, and all the cards you get back are 0 mana. So you can just have an insane tempo swing. Another little side note to this card is that you don't have to use the cards in the same turn. So if you're already ahead and if you get like a bunch of removal in your hand and you don't want to play those cards, you do lose the discount, but you still get to keep those cards in your hand to play later. So it's still insane value. Next up for the new Old God cards is going to be Nzoth, God of the Deep. Now this one I'm probably most excited for just because it requires some creative deck building around it. Looking at this card itself, similar to Yoggsaron, this card, it doesn't have rush or taunt or any healing. So the cards that you resurrect from it, ideally you want to have rush or taunt. Otherwise, your opponent will just rush you over on the following turn. You are going to want to put some very specific minions of each type in your deck in order for him to get good value, or you're just not going to want to put him in your deck at all if you can only resurrect like 2 different kind of minions, right? And looking through all the tribes, some of the best tribes to resurrect are going to be dragons, demons, elementals, beasts, and maybe mechs. Some of the worst tribes that you don't want to be resurrecting or building around are going to be like murlocs, pirates, and totems. Now, there could be a lot more cards revealed that fit under these good tribes, but just looking at the cards that we currently have and which classes can make use of this card the most, we have Shaman, which has access to Walking Fountain for the elemental. It has a couple beasts, like with the Lurker below, and maybe even the new Fleethoof Pearl Tusk. There's a couple good dragons we could use. There's like Squall Hunter, there's like Dragon Queen Alexstrasza in a Highlander deck, maybe even like an Alexstrasza. Warlock might be another class that could utilize this guy pretty decently. They have some pretty big demons that all have taunt. They have some pretty big decent dragons like Zaraku. They might even run like a Dragon Queen Alexstrasza or an Alexstrasza, maybe even a Crazed Netherwing. And if they're running a quest version, so that way they can tap into this guy for free, they might even be running like a Crag for that pirate. I was actually surprised to see that a warrior could utilize this pretty decently as well. So for dragons, they do have a Deathwing. They do have a mech for like the Scrap Golem potentially. They do have a beast for Armadillo, and then they do also run pirates like for their Ankar. So those aren't ideal, but just kind of gives you an idea that it could work in that kind of a deck. Maybe like a taunt warrior. And then another class that I thought could utilize this pretty decently might be like Druid. They do have quite a big pool of dragons. They have like Yoggsaron, Emerald Explorer, maybe something they draw off the dream portals like the dragons. They have plenty of beasts, as we know, because of guardian animals. It's just a matter of how is that class can utilize like elementals or demons. It's going to be a little bit tougher for Druid, but they have a couple really good dragons and beasts. Every other class doesn't have too many other minion types available to them to be able to utilize this guy to its full extent. But we might get more cards revealed in the next expansion that might help other classes out. Now, one thing that I wanted to add as well is that you don't want to be throwing in bad minions into your deck just so you can get value from the Nzoth. Like, you don't want to be throwing in garbage pirates or garbage elementals just to get extra value from this guy. You're probably going to want to put him in if you happen to have multiple tribes already going on in your deck. So maybe even in Highlander decks where they can run lots of different kind of cards, he could potentially work in like those slower Highlander decks. Like a fast Highlander Hunter is probably not going to want to use this guy, even though they do run dragons, mechs like with Dragonbane and beasts. Turn 10 is pretty slow for them, so I don't even know if they're going to want to run this guy. Like, they usually don't even run Dragon Queen Alexstrasza right now because it's too expensive, and they usually only cap out at like a Bran. Yeah, I think this guy has a ton of potential if we get creative with our deck building, and we'll also have to see what other cards we get to make this guy have some insane value. Another new old god card that requires some pretty creative deck building is going to be Cthulhu, the Shattered. So this guy's pretty unique. So at the start of the game, he breaks into 4 pieces and gets shuffled into your deck. Once you play all 4 of these pieces, then you shuffle in Cthulhu into your deck. So then you can go ahead and draw him and then play his battle cry. So there's a lot of setup, but it's a big payoff. So naturally, because you need to collect all 4 of these pieces and then Cthulhu and then play it, he fits best into really heavy cycle decks where you can draw all these pieces in a timely fashion, or into really heavy control decks where you're planning on going to fatigue, because he could be your win condition if fatigue isn't an option. So looking at decks that we currently have that have a ton of cycle, we have Druid as one of them. They draw super fast, and they can even benefit from some of these removal spells. We also have a couple of new cards that were revealed alongside Cthulhu that could even benefit Druid with all these pieces. We have all the new eclipses, the lunar and the solar eclipse, and the new legendary Kiri. Being able to do 6 damage AoE to everything is kind of insane. Being able to do 14 damage split up between all enemies is kind of insane. And they can even combine it with like a lunar eclipse to deal 3 damage to something and kill something else in the same turn. Druid can also make use of these 5 mana cost spells, like with Anubis at Defender or Steel Beetle. Now that I think about this could actually be really good. Another class that likes to cycle very quickly is Warlock, and Warlock could even use a little bit more removal. I don't know if you're going to want to play this on like a Quest Warlock or like a Hand Warlock. And then another deck that I thought of that does cycle very quickly is like a Broom Paladin. You're probably not going to want to run this card in there just because they already have a solid win condition. They already have solid removal, so they don't need another one. But just another idea of a deck that cycles very quickly. Now, in a slower control deck that just wants to get to the end of their deck, like a control shaman, this could be a much needed win condition for them when fatigue isn't an option always. They don't have a ton of card draw, but being a control shaman, they'll eventually get to the end of their deck, and they can actually utilize these spells very well. Shaman can always use more removal, and you can even combine it with like Diligent Note Taker to get more of these back if you wanted to use more removal. And you can even use these spells for like last turn effects as well, for like Torrent or whatnot. Another card that Shaman has available to them is Groundskeeper, which you need a 5 mana cost spell in your hand, which all these pieces are, so it naturally fits with the Groundskeeper. And then the last of the classes that I figured could utilize this guy is surprisingly Rogue with Stowaway. Now, I don't know how viable it'll be in Rogue because Rogue typically likes very high tempo cards, and these cards are very low tempo for their mana cost, so probably will not fit into Rogue. Maybe like some kind of like a meme Rogue deck that uses like Stowaway and other shuffle mechanics. But Rogue does have ways of cycling through their deck, like with Galakrond and Togwaggle, and they have ways of discounting their cards too. I mean, Preparation, you can go ahead and discount your spells. Otherwise, the Galakrond and Togwaggle discounts everything pretty cheaply. So who knows? Maybe there will be some kind of a fringe, like, control rogue deck that's out there. Yeah, I'm excited for this guy to pull off the combo, and it's going to feel so satisfying to just smack our opponent for 30 damage. And last up, but definitely not least, is the RNG god himself, Yoggsaron, Master of Fate. Now this guy is super interesting. If you've cast 10 spells this game, spin the wheel of Yoggsaron. So there's 6 different options that he can do. For 5 of the options, there's a 19% chance. One of them is you get to fill up your hand with random spells that cost 0 for this turn. One of them you get to take control of 3 enemy minions. One of them you get to fill up the entire board with minions, and then yours have Rush. Another one you get to cast like a Yogg box, and then another one you get to destroy all minions and then add their health and attack to Yoggsaron. But the 6th and final one, that's where it gets spicy. There's a 5% chance to roll this one, and when you do, it randomly casts Pyroblast on everything until someone dies. Talk about a coin flip. Now, in looking at how to best utilize this guy, we have to look at his possible effects and how to consistently get some good value from him despite rolling the wheel. So when you fill up your hand with random spells and they cost 0 this turn, that's a good value card. Filling up the board with minions or taking the 3 minions or destroying all minions, those are all board clears. And then the mystery box, that's kind of like a value card slash board clear as well. So most of these things are going to be board clears or value cards. So naturally, this guy is best when played from behind because you have the most possibilities of completely wiping the board and having that huge swing turn. And obviously he does fit best into decks that do cast a lot of spells. So some classes that do cast a lot of spells, obviously Mage. Mage is kind of known as being like the casino RNG kind of class. Now, I don't know what kind of a mage deck this will fit into. Maybe Highlander, I'm guessing, because in like the small spell mage that we have currently, they usually don't want to get to turn 10 and be behind. They're usually killing ya with like mana giants and Shenvalas and stuff like on turn 4, 5, 6. But Highlander Mage does tend to go a little bit longer and they are easily able to cast 10 spells in the game. And then looking at a couple other classes, we have like Shaman and Priest. Both of those classes can generate a ton of spells throughout the game as well. And both those classes are kind of a controlling class that wouldn't mind playing this guy on turn 10 when they're behind to have that huge swing turn. Yeah, just playing the odds, I'm looking at this guy as more of like a removal card with the potential to do some pretty crazy things. And speaking of crazy things, one really crazy combo you can do with this is in Demon Hunter. You can cast Blur, which makes your hero not take any damage this turn, and then play Yoggsaron, and the 5% chance that it casts Rod of Roasting, so it casts Pyroblast on everything, you're guaranteed to win because you can't take any damage. 5% of the time, it works every time. But because this guy is so random, he's probably not going to see too much competitive play, but man, is he going to be fun to play with. I hope all these ideas for these new Old God cards give you guys something to work with, and you guys can go ahead and start brainstorming some ideas as well. But I am super excited to play with these cards. I hope you guys are. If you guys have any other ideas on how to use these Old God cards the best, go ahead and comment down below in the comment section. I really want to hear your guys' ideas. And as always, if you guys enjoy deck building and off-meta stuff, then this is the channel for you. Hit that subscribe button down below. And if you enjoyed the video, then hit that like button while you're there, as that helps out the YouTube algorithm a lot. I'll see you in the next video. Stay funky. Psst. Hey, yeah, you. Thank you so much for watching. If you like this video, then hit that like button down below. And while you're there, hit the big red button or click here to subscribe to catch more off-meta decks just like this. Stay funky.